that's the can't interact function. Okay, let's delete all of this. Boop. All right. All right. So let's let me make sure that we're supposed to write a script now. Let's see. I mean, I said set up prop target, ped target, and target at a specific location. You can do all those things in the config in the exact same way that I just did. You just go to the README or the templates or the examples, and you can set them up that way. Now we're going to do a standalone script. So we're going to actually write a script now. So everybody strap in. So I'm going to start from scratch. We're going to start from a blank screen and write a complete script here that's functional and works. And you guys will see how it goes. And I've cheated. I've pre-written the script so that I don't sit here, so you don't have to sit here and watch me make typos all night, because I'm really bad about. If you've ever watched my streams, you'll know that I have a tendency to make typos. But anyway, so basically to start a new script, I'm just going to go into, this is my folder, custom Ksui custom scripts folder. So this is all the scripts that I've written for the server. And I'm going to create a new folder, and we're going to call it Ksui 2 underscores so that it shows up at the top of the list, lesson 1. All right, so we've started our script. So there's a couple of files that you have to have in your, anytime you write a script, there's a couple of files you have to have. The first one that you have to have, you just click new file. You need a fxmanifest.lua is the first file you're going to need. The next file you're going to need is a, for generally always you're going to want to config.lua. That's where you're going to set up your config tables, like I just was discussing in excruciating detail. You're going to want a server Lua. Usually, you don't always have to have a server Lua, because you may do something that's completely client-side and it never has to reference anything on the server. It's completely standalone on the client, and then you don't need that one. But generally speaking, you're always going to need a server Lua, and you're going to need a client Lua. And in future lessons, we'll do it a little differently. We'll do some folders, and we'll have multiple clients, multiple servers. But these are the basic files you always have to have for a script to work. The next thing you're going to need is you're going to go into your fxmanifest, and there's several things that you need. I'm going to try to... So first is the FX version. I'm using Cerulean. I'm pretty sure that's the most recent. I don't know. I'd have to ask Snaily, but I know Cerulean is what I've used in most of my stuff. You basically just have to look, and there was a previous version that was called Bodacious. There's one that's called MP_Christmas. This is basically just referencing what release of GTA 5 you're working in. And I'm pretty sure Cerulean is the most recent updates and everything that they've done. You have to have, the next thing that you have to have on your fxmanifest is the name of the game. If you are doing FiveM, this would say, you know, red. I think it either says Red Dead or FiveM. I can't remember, but that just lets the game know what game the code is written for, so that it knows what all it's loading. You should have your author, just so you know who wrote the script. You should always include a description for, just as a general practice. And then you're going to want to have a version, just for good practice. That way, if you're ever having trouble with a script and you go look and you're in version 1.000, but the one that's on GitHub is at 1.1, you just know you have an old version. So it's just good practice to update your versions. The next thing you're going to need is a table of shared scripts. So for shared scripts are any files that you're going to reference inside the script that has to be accessed by both the server side and the client side. So in this simple example we're doing, the config.lua that we're going to write is the only file that's going to need to be referenced by both the client and the server. So real quick, basic overview of what the difference is. client is the player's computer. It's their desktop that they're playing the game on. There's things that happen on their computer that don't happen on the server. This is what I was talking about with syncing issues. There's two different ways to create PEDs. If anybody's ever done LSD on our server, that's the script that I wrote that does all the actions on the client side. That's why people are running around saying, "Oh, can you see the shark? Can you see the mimes, or can you see the Sasquatches?" And everybody's like, "What the hell kind of drugs are you on?" They literally see those things, but nobody else does because they're only on the client side. So you can create PEDs, you can create props, you can do a lot of things that are just on the client side. In fact, it's good practice if there's a PED or a prop that everybody's going to access and it doesn't move, it's best to create it on the client side because it reduces clutter on the server, makes your server run a little smoother. And there's no reason to have it on the server because every single person sees the exact same thing in the exact same place. And so there's a lot of scenarios where having stuff client side is best. For example, all of our PEDs that you can interact with on the server, like to rent cars or whatever, those are client side PEDs. So you may even have a different model of the PED because they have different clothes and stuff than what everybody else sees, but you all see the same PED in the same place. However, if you're going to have like hostile PEDs that are going to fight with the players, you have to sync those with the server, or it's going to be, it's going to be screwed up where one person's getting attacked and nobody else is, and the PEDs don't recognize the other players. There's all kinds of shit that happens, and we'll talk about that in future, more advanced classes. But for anyone that doesn't know, that's what client and server means. So server is the server where it's hosted. It's what we all connect to. So there's other things that happen on the server that are shared between all clients. And so anything that happens on the server can be shared with all clients. That doesn't necessarily mean it is shared with all clients. It just means it can be. But there's some actions that you have to use the server to execute. For example, if you are getting paid your salary from your job, you can't do that client side because if you do it client side, the server doesn't know that you got paid. There's no record of it. So it has to happen on the server side, and it updates whenever you get paid. It updates the database to show how much money you now have versus what you had before. And so anytime you're adding items to a player, it has to be done server side. Anytime you're adding money, it has to be done server side. There's a lot of things that have to be done server side, especially anything that updates the database. You cannot update the database from the client side. You can only do that server side. So that's the difference between client and server. Is there any questions about that? Because that was something that I didn't understand initially when I first started coding. No questions? Okay. All right. So then you want to you have to, in your FX, was there a question, Lennon?
Nix is typing. I don't know if she has a question or not.
Okay. So
okay. She explained a lot.
okay, good. Okay, so then server scripts, you have to reference, you have to tell your script what files it's going to use for server information. So I call it server.lua. It doesn't have to be named that. It can be named anything. But the easiest way to keep track of what's server side and what's client side is to name it server.lua. In fact, if I have multiple scripts that are on the server, or multiple files that are on the server for some reason, I would have it called like, something underscore server, right? So it can be named anything you want it to be named, but you want to identify it as server side so you don't get confused later. And then finally, you have to reference client scripts. And if you remember, polyzone was a dependency for this script. So this is all the potential polyzone things that I may use. And basically at polyzone is how you identify the folder where this script is. So for client side, anything that's happening on the client, it will be able to access client Lua for information. And it will also be able to access, I think it's in standalone. Polyzone. So because I've referenced polyzone client, box zone, entity, circle, and combo, it will also access all of these files to get information. Whenever you are doing the QB target and you say like add box zone, it has to be able to access this box zone.lewis so it knows what to do with that information. Otherwise, that information is meaningless to the script. So is that clear? Is there any questions on that? Because that is a slightly confusing, but if you just put at the name of the script that you're wanting to access slash and then any of the files within that script that you need to access. So anytime I'm writing a script that's going to be used in target, in fact, every script that I've ever written, I add the polyzones just so I don't forget to do that, because you frequently use polyzones for various things. So with that is it for our fxmanifest. We're all set up so that whenever we launch this in the server, it's going to know where to find all the files and data that it needs. And that's the purpose of the manifest, is to tell the script all the data that it's going to need to access in order to run. So let's start with our config. That's the best place to start usually. So the very first thing you have to have, as demonstrated in the QB target init, is config equals open close. So one thing that I do with all mine is I say config equals config or open close. That way, it makes it so that you can set up configs in any of the scripts and stuff. But I mean, this is perfectly fine. In fact, I'm just going to leave it that. Well, I'm going to do it the other way because I just like doing it the other way. But I'm not going to try to explain all that tonight. It's not because I don't understand it at all. No, it's so that you can set up configs elsewhere. Like if you're programming along and you have a script that's really complicated and you have multiple, for example, I'll just show you an example real quick, so I won't get too far into these weeds. But for example, our farming script, there was multiple devs that worked on it, and where is it? A, B, C, D, E, F, G. There it is. Multiple devs worked on it, so we have a lot of each one of us has our own files that we worked on. So if you're working along and you wanted to just create a config within one of these that's not accessible to all, that's not a shared config, if you put this in your config file, then you type config somewhere else in the files, it'll know that as soon as it sees config that you're starting a config file. You're starting a config table. If you don't have this on your shared config, then you would have to create a variable before you could use config elsewhere. And that's all I'm going to talk about that. Because I'm trying to be efficient here. How are we doing? Oh, fuck, it's been an hour already? Okay, we're going to speed it up. Sorry, guys. All right, so I've got my config here. I'm going to set up 2 locations. I'm going to set up a random interaction point, which is just some place where you can do an action. I've already grabbed chords. I'll show you how to grab chords whenever we go into the server, but I didn't want to waste time like going out and grabbing chords, so I've already picked a spot. And I've got a ped interaction point. That's going to be a ped that's standing somewhere, and it's going to be mod, and I'm going to interact with mod. And so then each one of those locations is going to have options for what happens when you third eye. And so these are my options. So the first one is going to be, I always add a param, and then I just put additional and additional just in case I want to add params later, just so it's already set up. It just passes some data. I'll show you how that works later. And I've got position 1, 2, 3. We've got an item. You're going to have an ink pen to get this option. This is going to be for demonstrative purposes. So I'm going to show you when I don't have an ink pen in my pocket what happens, and when I do have an ink pen what happens. If I don't, I'm only going to have these 2 options. And if I do have an ink pen, then I'm going to have 3 options. So that's just going to be kind of demonstrative. The ink pen to sign the document is going to be a client-side event. The pay fee of $100 is going to be server side because, like I told you, you can't get money from the client side. You have to do that on the server side. And then if you ask for a refund, that's going to be a client side event. But this is going to be demonstrative to show you that I can't get a refund on the client side. So what this is going to do is going to trigger a client event, and then we're going to jump over and trigger a server event. So that's going to be demonstrative. So this is all I need for my config file because we're just going to do two options. We went through configs pretty heavily, so let's go ahead and jump over to the client script.